Step 6. Investments. Sam enjoyed the way they were gaining momentum and could see it all coming together. He was eager to carry on the investments discussion. He had some idea that he wanted to invest in a low-cost, tax-efficient way. Dave paused for a moment. He knew that if he used too many terms and ideas, he would lose Sam in the jargon. He wanted to give enough information so that Sam would get to what would likely be the best conclusion. He was glad he already had spent time with Sam previously on investing, but also really wanted the importance to hit home. He decided to take a bit longer on this section. He began with the end in mind. What steps Sam should take, and despite all the jargon and terms, there were only 4 things Sam should do to give him the best return with the lowest risk. He sketched these out for Sam. 1. Become a long-term investor early, ignoring the temporary ups and downs. 2. Reduce fees and taxes paid. 3. Invest in a balanced and diversified portfolio. 4. Then review and rebalance every 6 to 12 months. With all the terminology, that was it. But Dave wanted Sam to be committed to doing it, and he knew this would come through understanding. So he went through explaining each step further. Sam, the first step is to become a regular investor now. Dave had emphasized the words investor and now. Sam realized that wasn't by accident. Yes, I know, said Sam. Assuming 7% return, every 10 years I delay, I'm halving the amount future Sam will get. Dave smiled. Sam caught on quickly. But he then asked how long it would take him to double his money assuming 10%. Sam wasn't sure, so Dave explained the rule of 72. So you take 72 and divide it by the interest rate. So in this case, about 7 years to double my money. This was enough to get Sam investing now. But there was one more reason to start now. So he quoted Benjamin Graham. Great, another person to Google, thought Sam. In the short run, a market is a voting machine, but in the long run, it is a weighing machine. Dave paused to let this sink in. Was this a step too far too quickly? Suddenly, Sam's face lit up. Does it mean that in the short run, prices may go up and down depending on popularity, but in the long term, they will be valued at what they are really worth? Spot on, said Dave. The more time you have, the lower the risk, as eventually it will be weighed. It is also the difference between the long-term investor and short-term speculator, or perhaps more accurately, gambler, who try to guess what the voting of the market is going to do. Dave explained how in one study over a 15-year period, by taking out the 40 best days, the average return dropped from 6% to -5% per year. So about 1% of the days accounted for taking it from a 5% loss to a 6% gain. I'm not sure who has access to a crystal ball to guess which 40 days over a 15-year period will be the best, so it is best just to hang in there. The second thing Sam could do was reduce fees and taxes. Being tax efficient immediately made sense to Sam. Simply investing through a pension or ISA were most likely to be the most tax efficient. With a pension taken off before tax, he would need to pay some tax later, or an ISA, which meant he didn't pay any tax on the growth. Made sense. Dave also emphasized that assuming 7% return over 40 years, Sam could increase his return 50% for every 1% he could reduce in fees. Sam decided he would only invest in funds which charged less than 1%. After all, active managers who charge more are likely to be trying to time those 40 days where the market does really well. The third thing was to diversify. Dave explained to Sam that different investments do well in different conditions, and Sam should want to do well in all conditions. I'm sure your mother would have told you not to have all your eggs in one basket, said Dave. Or put it another way, would you play 11 strikers on a football field because you thought they would score more? Or on the flip side, you could play 11 defenders. You'd have a very low risk that the other team would score, but you'd be unlikely to score any goals. Now, imagine that the goals you score are the return on your investment, and the goals you concede are the risks of your investment. A balanced team of defenders and attackers is usually the best option and will lead to the most wins in a season. In investment terms, what tends to happen is that people invest in a balanced portfolio, and then towards retirement they put on more defensive players. The fourth thing was to rebalance. Dave thought that they had probably covered enough for now, but for completeness mentioned that Sam should rebalance his investments, probably annually. What this did was it meant that if one did well, He sold it, and if another did badly, he bought more. Effectively sell high, buy low. Dave decided that if this didn't hit home, it was okay. They could revisit later. To sum up, Dave said, becoming an investor rather than a saver increases risk, but this is reduced by giving a long time period. Reducing taxes and fees is likely to increase return. Diversifying reduces risk, and rebalancing could increase return and reduce risk. So I know what I will invest in, said Sam. I'll invest in diversified passive index or ETFs. Dave was happy he had invested this time with Sam and noted he mentioned ETFs, or exchange traded funds, which meant he had done his own research. But how do I do this? Sam followed up with. Well, to keep it tax efficient, generally a split between your pension, which you can't touch until you are older, which is good and bad, and ISA, which you have more easy access to. Dave gave Sam links to some of his favorite providers who seemed to offer good value for money. He would research his own as well. After all, he wanted to be in control. But the talk of pensions reminded Dave about what he had seen earlier. Sam, do you have your workplace pension details? Yes, said Sam proudly. It's right here. Dave quickly glanced at it, and his suspicions were confirmed. Sam, it looks like your workplace has auto-enrolled you in the bare minimum of 1% in a pension plan, in something called a lifestyle fund. Sam had a closer look. He wasn't chuffed with the lifestyle fund, as they were charging a fee to manage a fund of other funds, which also charged fees. They also bucketed him with people who were much older than him. All of this was costing future Sam. But then it hit him, like a bag of money falling on his head. He hadn't been enrolled in the company's matching pension, where they matched up to 4% of contributions he made. He was losing money because he hadn't taken the time to investigate. Dave made things worse by explaining because pensions are pre-tax, so 100 out of his bank account was 125 not in his pension. But even worse, the company was matching, so that was 250. He had so far missed out on 2,500 in contributions, which he estimated was worth about 40k to future Sam. Sam, cheer up, Dave said. Think how good this is. You still have many years of getting these matching contributions, and now you know how important it is, and won't miss something like this again. I'd consider this an investment in future Sam through education. As Benjamin Franklin said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Sam loved how Dave's face would light up when he quoted famous people. Well, famous to Dave anyway. Sam was glad he had caught this now and decided to immediately sign up to the 4% matching contribution, and for good measure made his contribution 5%. He also looked at the investment fund options and chose some of the lower fee and diversified index funds. He opened an investment ISA, which he planned on committing 20% to it. Not so fast, said Dave. Between your debt commitments and additional pension contributions, let's perhaps put in 5 to 10% for now and see how things look after the next step. I don't want you to end up in debt again, or this to become something that makes you miserable. That was a lot of information, so Dave and Sam took a break and had a strong cup of coffee.